Welcome to this episode of Ciao DMV, Italian American Life in the DMV. My name is Joseph Barone, and I will be your host. This podcast channel is dedicated to all things Italian and Italian American in the DMV, aka DC, Maryland, and Virginia. My focus is on the Italian American experience, from family stories to little-known history to businesses to cultural events, etc. Today, I am pleased to bring you a very special interview with Richard DiLiberto Jr., Esquire, the chairman of the Delaware Commission on Italian Heritage and Culture. So welcome, Rick, and let's begin with the very typical question that I ask pretty much every one of the guests on my podcast is, where did you grow up?
As a child, I grew up in the Poconos in northeastern Pennsylvania, in a town called Hazleton, Pennsylvania. And I moved to Delaware to attend law school in 1983, and I've been here my whole adult life.
Wow.
So over 40 years.
I've been up to that neck of the woods in Pennsylvania before. I grew up in New York City, so we'd go up to Pennsylvania with Boy Scouts and some friends and that sort of stuff. But where is your family from in Italy? And do you still have relatives there, and do you keep in touch with them?
Yes, my grandfather was born in Agrigento, Sicily, in a little town called Castel Termini. And my grandmother on my dad's side was born in Agrigento, Sicily, in a little town called Rocco Palumba. And I was able to go back 2 or 3 years ago and find my grandfather's boyhood home in Castel Termini and literally sat on the stoop of his house. It was a very emotional and moving experience, and it was wonderful.
I can understand that. In fact, my mother grew up not too far from your grandparents' hometown. Although my mother was born here in the U.S., she grew up in the city of Ragusa, which is about an hour or so drive, maybe 2-hour drive from Agrigento. I've been there. And my father's side comes from a small town called Militello in Val di Catania. So I've been there a couple of times. In fact, we're scheduled to go back in September to that area. Now, do you have any relatives still there, and do you keep in touch with them?
I do. When I visited there a few years ago, I had to hire a guide to show me around and to find my grandfather's house on Via Regina Elena. That's the name of the little cobblestone street. And I was able to visit the church where he was baptized, and I was able to visit the sepulcher where my great-grandparents' remains are in Agrigento. And about 40% of the town is still DiLiberto's.
Wow.
And when I got to the piazza, the guide said, just go out and say your name. And I did, and all these wonderful townspeople came out and told me that they were my cousins, walked me to City Hall, and we found my grandfather's birth certificate in a big old dusty book from 1887.
That is fantastic. That is wonderful. Now, thinking back to your parents and growing up first in Pennsylvania, what are 2 or 3 of the key values that you learned as a child that you take with yourself into your work, into your personal adult life, etc.?
Well, I can tell you that when I was growing up, my father was a police officer, and my father was not able to finish school. I think he had to stop going to school in 10th grade, and he worked in my grandfather's shoemaker shop. My grandfather learned the shoemaker trade in Italy, Sicily. So my dad helped him, and then he was born in 1921. So in 1941, of course, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So my dad enlisted and was then an officer in the Army, a soldier in the Army for 44 months, and he was a military police officer, and that's how he learned to be a policeman. And he came back after the war, after serving in World War II, overseas and here in the States. And he became a police officer, but he would always do side jobs. He would do construction work or cement work or whatever he could do to make an honest dollar. And on Saturdays, he would take me around in his bright yellow pickup truck. And in those days, the senior citizens, before the days of Instacart, would literally buy their groceries at the Acme and wheel their grocery cart down the street to the senior citizen high-rise building, which in those days was, I think, 6 or 7 floors. We called it a high-rise. And after the senior citizens would do this and carry their groceries in, the manager of the supermarket had a serious problem. No more grocery carts because they were all in a jumble in front of the senior citizen high-rise. So my dad had the bright idea that we would go into the supermarket, it was called the Acme, and we would tell the manager that we would bring the carts back for him at 50 cents a piece. And the manager jumped at that suggestion. So I remember my dad and I would go around to the senior citizen high-rise, and we would pick the carts up, put 10 on the right and 10 on the left. And in those days, these carts would like nest into one another, so we could fit nicely 10 carts on the left, 10 carts on the right, and we could do the math. 20 carts at 50 cents a piece would give us $10. So my dad would give me $5 of it. He would split it with me. And it was a wonderful lesson because one day we were traveling back from the senior citizen high-rise, taking the 20 rattling, rolling steel grocery carts back to the Acme. And I don't know if you've ever gone up a pothole street with 20 metal grocery carts in the back of a metal pickup truck, but it's not a quiet endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And my buddies were all playing baseball at the baseball field next to the road, and they all looked up and saw this cacophony of sound and saw me in the passenger seat of my dad's truck, and all stood stiff-armed and laughed uproariously. Isn't that Ricky DiLiberto? And then why are they taking all those grocery carts? And I remember covering my face like this to hide my shame. And my father didn't say anything for a moment or two. He just looked straight ahead, and I could tell he was seeing out of his peripheral vision that I was embarrassed. And he said, "Are you ashamed of your father, Ricky?" And I fibbed, and I said, "No, Daddy, I'm not ashamed." He said, "Let me tell you something. Don't you ever be ashamed if you're making an honest dollar or an honest day's work and you're not stealing from somebody." And I never forgot that. And I carried it with me through college. I carried it with me through law school, and I carry it with me today when I'm representing clients who have been in terrible accidents or had a family member killed or just attempting to assert their legal rights. And no matter what the endeavor, we should never be embarrassed as long as we're doing an honest day's work for an honest day's dollar.
Amen to that. Absolutely. And in some ways, your life is parallel to mine. My dad also served in World War II. He was in the Army Air Force. He repaired engines on B-17 and B-29s and eventually became an electrician. And in many ways, like you, hardworking, extremely honest man, never took, I think there were times when he could have taken bribes and stuff and refused to take any of them and just went and did his job the best that he could. So it's wonderful. Now, did you choose law because your dad was a policeman, or was there some other reason why you decided to become an attorney?
Well, I was a school teacher first. I graduated from Bloomsburg University in Pennsylvania with an undergraduate degree in education. And I taught for a while. And then I taught while I was in law school. I was teaching homebound children who had been hit by a car or were suffering with cancer or were going through some terminal illness. And by doing that, bringing lessons to these children's bedsides, I really felt the connection with injured people. And that's why I became a lawyer in personal injury law, helping injury victims and injury death victims because of that work that I did with little kids, because they really inspired me. They may have been terminally ill, undergoing chemotherapy at 10, 12 years old, but they still wanted to learn. They still wanted their lessons brought to their home, which was very inspiring to me. So I went on to law school and I became a lawyer, and I've been practicing now since 1986. So 40 years this year is my my anniversary of practicing law, and I'm admitted. My practice is in Delaware. I've also been admitted to the bar in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and the United States Supreme Court.
And have you always been, since you were admitted to the bar, since have you always been with Young? Was it Conaway, Stargott, and Taylor? I hope I
I
pronounced it.
have, yes. Other than my first year, 1986 through 1987, I was a judicial law clerk in the Superior Court of the state of Delaware, which is typically a job that new lawyers do coming out if you're lucky enough to get offered a job with a judge. And I clerked for 1 year for a great Italian-American judge by the name of Vincent Biferato in the Superior Court, who was the resident judge of the Superior Court of Delaware. He gave me my first job, and I'll never forget it. And after that, I've been with Young Conaway since August of 1987. So I've been here, it'll be 39 years this August. Yeah.
That's a very long time. You don't hear people, and maybe in law it's different, but generally you don't hear people stay with the same company organization for that length of time anymore.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful home for me. And since that time, my wife Faith and I have raised three daughters, and two of whom have become attorneys, and one is a special education teacher. So we're just very blessed that we were given this opportunity, and I'm very thankful to my colleagues and my partners who at Young Conaway always gave me the opportunity to do things in the community, like serving the Italian community as chairman of the Italian Commission, now as president of Delaware Unico, and serving in the Delaware House of Representatives for 10 years. So it's been a wonderful marriage here at Young Conaway and great professional experience.
And so this is actually the perfect segue now to get into the work that you're doing with the Delaware Commission on Italian Heritage and Culture. So let's go back to the beginning. You did serve it's the House of Delegates. Is that
House of
House of
Representatives.
Representatives? I'm sorry, House of Representatives in Delaware. How did you wind up getting selected to be chair of the commission?
Well, I served 10 years in the Delaware State House, and I rose to be my caucus's ranking member on the Judiciary, Corrections, Public Safety Committee. And then I was able to serve on the Joint Finance Committee, which writes the state budget for the state of Delaware. So I was able to get to know, at that time, Senator Ruth Ann Minner, who became Lieutenant Governor Ruth Ann Minner, who became Governor Ruth Ann Minner. She was the first female governor ever in Delaware. So after I left the House of Representatives in 2002, I still maintained a good relationship with Governor Minner, and she appointed me chairman of the Delaware Italian Commission. And the governor has that power to appoint the chairman of the commission, and they're 3-year terms. And I'm pleased to say that since that time, I've been appointed by 3 more governors: Governor Jack Markell, Governor John Carney, and most recently, Governor Matt Meyer. So I've served, I guess, 20 years as chairman of the Delaware Commission, along with 8 great other members, 3 of whom are appointed by the president of the Senate, 3 of whom are appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and 3 are appointed by the governor, one of whom has the great honor of being chairperson.
And so with that the 20-year reign, what are the key objectives for most of my listeners probably don't know anything about the commission? What are the key objectives of the commission?
We are set up by the legislature, and the Delaware legislature actually passed a law at 29 Delaware Code Section 3501, setting up the Italian Commission to promote Italian heritage and culture in the state of Delaware, to preserve its history, and to set up Italian language programs in the schools of our state, and also to inspire business and trade between the two countries. So anybody can look at our website and get a little bit more information at italian.delaware.gov. And again, it's italian.delaware.gov. And you'll see a lot of good information about our Italian Commission. But I'll give you the verbatim. It's to establish, maintain, and develop cultural ties between Italians and Italian Americans, to foster a special interest in the historical and cultural backgrounds of these groups, as well as the economic, the political, social, and artistic lives of the countries involved, and help establish or promote Italian language programs in the schools of Delaware.
And one of the things in looking at your website, I noticed something about a Societe da Vinci.
Okay,
What
that's
is
yeah.
your
The Da Vinci
relationship?
Society in Delaware is a great group. We are not connected to them, but we're very
Okay,
supportive of them,
okay,
and oftentimes, we'll share information with them and do projects with them and things like that. That's a private organization comprised of dedicated Italian American people in Wilmington, Delaware, providing educational grants and supporting cultural events and institutions in the community. It's a nonprofit organization, and they do fundraising for Italian American students and organizations.
okay. Much like the Lido Club in Washington, D.C., which I'm a member of. Um, Looking back over the 20 years, and 20 years is a long time. What would you say are the two or three key accomplishments, key things that you say these are things I'm the most proud of on the commission?
Mhm. Well, in 1524, there was a great Italian explorer by the name of Verrazzano, and his name was Giovanni da Verrazzano, and he came from Florence, a little town called Greve in Chianti, and they call it that because it's the Chianti region where most of the greatest grapes in the world are grown. But he decided not to stay and enjoy the beautiful vineyards outside his home in Greve in Chianti, but actually get on a ship and come over and navigate the east coast of what would become the United States of America. So he came past Delaware, and he actually charted it on his map and called it Arcadia, which means the Garden of Eden. He thought it was so beautiful. And he started in Cape Fear, North Carolina. He traveled all the way up the coast, all the way up to New England. And there's a great bridge in New York now called the Verrazano Bridge, which you may have been over. What very few people know, however, is there's also a bridge in Ocean City, Maryland called the Verrazano Bridge. Very small, much smaller, obviously, than the New York Bridge. But we found out about this, and we said, everybody knows about some of the great explorers, Amerigo Vespucci and Christopher Columbus, but nobody really knew much about Verrazano. So we started investigating it, and we found out that he really came very close to the coastline of Delaware. If not landed here, he maybe landed in Ocean City, Maryland. So we put a monument to Verrazano in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and it is now the most visited monument in the state of Delaware on the boardwalk at Olive Avenue. We also put in a garden called the Garden of the Navigators in honor of Vespucci, Columbus, and Verrazano in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. People stop there and take pictures for their wedding, or they read a book, or they enjoy a cup of cappuccino. And we've now established a sister city relationship with Greve and Chianti in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where we do visits to each other. And we now have a Delaware room in Verrazano Castle dedicated to the state of Delaware. And I've actually been there. We were able to actually look at his ship's log and find out that he really did make this journey in 1524, and it's now all documented. And I take great pride in that. We also have a sister city relationship with Olevano sul Tusciano, in Italy, and the city of Wilmington, Delaware. And we have a great relationship with them. And finally, a third accomplishment would be we've established Italian language camp in the state of Delaware for children ages 4 through 14. And we do it for 2 weeks every summer to teach kids Italian language. And we're doing it again this summer. And we've taught a lot of kids Italian, and we promote Italian language and heritage in our state. So those are just three highlights. We've done literally hundreds and hundreds of things with my great colleagues, the 9 commissioners on the State Italian Commission and the other Italian American organizations, and Unico National and the other organizations, some of which you've already talked about. So keeping Italian heritage alive, culture alive, celebrating art. The final thing I'll mention is when Hitler invaded Florence during World War II, he stole a lot of the art. In fact, some of it he destroyed with blowtorches and burned a lot of the beautiful paintings. The Guardia di Finanza, which is the elite Italian police force, was able to get much of the art back. And we were able to bring it to Delaware and put it in one of the museums here for everybody to see several years back at no cost to any of citizens that wanted to see the recovered art. And you may have heard of a movie called Monuments Men, which I think had George Clooney. That's the story of the Guardia di Finanza and the great soldiers that were able to recover the stolen art from the Nazis that they had taken from the people of Italy.
And that's, this is fantastic. And in many ways, again, I can relate because I've been to the monument for Verrazano in Rehoboth quite a number of times. In fact, we have a place down in Lewis, Delaware, and of course go to the boardwalk quite a number of times each year and walk by that beautiful monument and the garden there. And I'll taken even a couple of photos in front of it and showed our kids many years ago when we just discovered it walking by one day. Didn't even know about it. So yes, it's many connections there, many
That's a
connections.
great connection. I did not know you had a place in Lewis. So
Yeah.
when you're in Lewis, go downtown to the Cannonball House, which is a
Hmm.
great historic building right in Lewis
Hmm.
proper.
Hmm.
And if you go in the backyard, we've erected a monument to Verrazano in Lewis in the Cannonball House. And we brought back one of the stones from his castle and we have it mounted on the monument. And you can really reach out and touch with your hand where Verrazano lived. We brought it back from his castle and it's now in Lewis, Delaware. And you can touch where he was a little boy.
I didn't know that. In fact, we should be back at the house probably in about a week or so, and I will definitely go to the Cannonball House and take a look at it and for it and take some photos and put it out on my Instagram.
What a wonderful, wonderful coincidence that we got to learn about your connection to Delaware. And now you can touch a little bit of where Verrazano was a little boy.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Looking forward to that. Now, one last question for you. Um, does the commission have any sort of well, actually, two questions. First, do you have any, what are you planning for the future for the commission? I know you've got some film things you're doing, some, Italian films that you can go and watch and I guess have a discussion about. But is there anything else the commission is planning on doing?
Yes. Well, I actually was with the Consul General of Italy last night in Philadelphia. He's a great new Consul General by the name of Nico Frandi. And for the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, because Philadelphia and Delaware were right in the middle of that, we are planning on doing some things here in Wilmington, and the mayor of Wilmington has some things planned. We're also planning on doing some things with the Consul General to celebrate. And many Italian Americans were very involved in the independence of America. Delaware is the first state.
Hmm.
We were the first state to ratify the Constitution. But what many don't know is when they met in Independence Hall in Philadelphia in July of 1776, Delaware was deadlocked, one vote apiece for independence and against independence. And the third vote was a man named Caesar Rodney, also named Cesare Rodney from Rome. He was an Italian national. He was very sick and he was on his deathbed in Dover, Delaware, suffering with aggressive facial cancer. They were able to get a note to him from Independence Hall in Philadelphia, sent it by courier to Dover, Delaware, saying, if you don't get to Philadelphia and vote, there will be no independence because none of the other states would vote for independence unless Delaware did. And Rodney rode through thunder and rain from Dover to Philadelphia. Of course, in those days, it was just muddy areas, along the Delaware River. Got there covered in mud, spurs, on horseback and or in a carriage, we're not sure, got in and voted for independence and broke the tie. Delaware then voted 2-1 to support the Declaration of Independence, and the other states fell in line. So we honor a Delawarean, Caesar Rodney, from that, but we also have to recognize that he was an Italian American.
That's a great piece of history. And I think most people don't know that at all. I'm just going to ask you one last question. I'm going to let you go. You mentioned Unico,
Hmm.
and I believe that you are the president of is it the Rehoboth?
Delaware,
Delaware.
the Delaware district of Unico, which is in Rehoboth.
So why don't you, for any of our listeners who don't know what the organization is, can you just kind of quickly give us an overview of that?
Sure. Unico is the largest Italian American service organization in the country. And if you want to look at our website, it is Unico, UNICO, okay? Unico. And it's actually an acronym, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag because I want people to do a little bit of research on it, but look at unico.org, and first person that tells us what it stands for gets the prize of the day. So I can't offer a prize, but I promise them a tour of the Verrazano Monument if they come to Delaware, okay? So Unico National has a organization affiliated with it called the Unico Foundation, and we do great charitable work for many charitable organizations across the country, including Cooley's Anemia, cancer research, homeless shelters, mental health, and other charitable organizations. So we raise a lot of money for charities, and we are a 501c3, the Unico Foundation, and we support Italian studies in universities. We support cancer research, as I said, and prevention, food banks and shelters, and other charitable organizations like soup kitchens and healthcare organizations. So Unico is an Italian American service organization, but we do all good for a lot of people, including for students and getting young people involved in cherishing their Italian heritage.
That's great. And I don't think a lot of people know that. So I'm glad I could help in a very, very small way get the message out about Unico and all of the good work that it does. And I encourage anyone who may be listening to this podcast to go check out their website, take a look at it, and see what you can do to support the organization.
Right. Well, now that everybody's had a chance to think about it, I'll tell you the acronym: unity, neighborliness, integrity, charity, and opportunity. UNICO.
What a great acronym and what a great name of an organization. So, Rick, I just want to take a moment to kind of wrap this up and say thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on my podcast, for agreeing to do it. I've learned a great deal. I've gotten to know you a little bit more, and I want to thank you very, very much. And I hope that one day we'll both be able to somehow meet in Rehoboth or the Lewis area and maybe have an espresso or two. And my treat.
Guaranteed, Giuseppe. Molto grazie. Thank you so much.
Ciao, ciao, Rick.
Ciao, ciao.
I hope that you have enjoyed this episode with Richard DiLiberto, the chairman of the Delaware Commission on Italian Heritage and Culture. Once again, I thank him for taking the time out of his busy schedule to be part of this podcast. However, before I close out this episode, I want to give a special thanks to Richard Philly Rich Leto for helping to make this episode possible. Philly Rich is the author of the book My Italian American Roots, a collection of pieces from my family time capsule. It is the story of how a simple cardboard box provided a route to explore his family's history and to connect with his ancestral roots. You can find it on Amazon. Please remember, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, please take a moment to like, comment, subscribe, and share with a friend. This is Joseph Barone, your host, signing out. Ciao, DMV.